When rancher Colt Hayward discovered someone had painted his dead wife's face on his weathered fence, he knew the devil himself had come calling. The morning sun cast long shadows across the Hayward ranch as Colt stepped onto his porch, coffee steam curling like prairie smoke in the crisp air. 27 years of hard living had carved lines around his steel-gray eyes, but nothing had prepared him for the sight that stopped him cold in his worn boots. There, on the far stretch of his fence that bordered the creek, vibrant colors blazed against the weathered wood. Not the crude markings of drifters or the territorial scratches of wildlife, but a painting. A real painting, detailed and haunting, depicting a woman in a blue calico dress standing in a field of wildflowers. Evie's dress. Evie's face. Evie's smile that had been buried 6 feet under for 3 years now. Papa, 8-year-old Griffin, appeared at his elbow, rubbing sleep from dark eyes that mirrored his father's. "What's that on the fence?" Colt's jaw tightened. Someone was playing a cruel game, and his boy didn't need to be part of it. "Go on back inside, son. Help yourself to biscuits." But Griffin had inherited more than his father's eyes. He'd gotten his stubborn streak too. The boy squinted across the pasture, his small hand shading his face. "Looks like Mama." The words hit Colt like a mule kick to the chest. He'd worked damn hard to keep Evie's memory sacred, her photographs tucked away where grief couldn't ambush him during his morning chores. Yet here she was, painted larger than life on his own fence for any passerby to gawk at. Inside. Now. The command came out harsher than intended, but Griffin scampered through the door without argument. Colt strode across the dewy grass, his boots leaving dark prints in the silver dawn. Up close, the painting stole his breath completely. Every detail was perfect. The way Evie tucked that stubborn curl behind her left ear, the tiny scar on her chin from childhood, even the exact shade of blue she'd worn to their wedding. Someone had studied her, known her, but who? And why paint her here, on his land? Like some kind of shrine or mockery, a splash of movement caught his eye downstream. There, crouched beside the creek with an easel and brushes, sat a young woman, in a faded brown dress. Her dark hair hung in a loose braid down her back, and her hand moved with practiced strokes across a small canvas. Colt's hand instinctively dropped to his hip, finding empty air where his gun belt usually rested. He'd left it inside, thinking this was just another peaceful morning. Mistaked, he approached quiet as a hunting cat, his years of tracking outlaws serving him well. The woman was absorbed in her work, humming a melody that made his skin prickle with recognition. Evie used to hum that same tune while kneading bread. 20 feet away, he could see what she was painting, his ranch house, but not as it looked now with its peeling paint and sagging porch rail. She was painting it as it had been 7 years ago, when Evie's flower boxes blazed with color and laughter echoed from the windows. "Ma'am." His voice cut through the morning stillness like a blade. The woman spun, her brush flying from startled fingers to land in the creek with a soft plop. Wide green eyes met his, and for a heartbeat, something flickered in their depths, not fear, but recognition. She was younger than he'd first thought, maybe 22 or 23, with the kind of quiet prettiness that snuck up on a man. But pretty girls didn't just appear on his land with intimate knowledge of his dead wife and detailed memories of his ranch's better days. "You're trespassing." He kept his voice level, but steel edged every word. She rose slowly, her hands visible and empty. "I apologize, Mr. Hayward. I didn't think you'd mind, seeing as the creek runs through public land here." The fact that she knew his name while he'd never laid eyes on her before sent warning bells clanging in his head. "You've got me at a disadvantage, Miss Knox." She lifted her chin with a dignity that reminded him of school teachers and preachers' daughters. Alara Knox. The name meant nothing to him, but the way she said it, like she expected it should, made his suspicious nature rear up like a spooked horse. "Well, Miss Knox, that may be public land, but my fence ain't. And my wife's face sure as hell ain't." Color bloomed across her cheeks, but she didn't back down. "I meant no disrespect to Mrs. Hayward's memory. Quite the opposite." "Then explain yourself." He crossed his arms, biceps straining against his work shirt. "How do you know what my wife looked like? How do you know what my house used to look like? And why are you painting scenes from my life like you lived them yourself?" Alara's gaze drifted to the painted fence, then back to his face. Something vulnerable flickered there, gone too quick to catch. Because, Mr. Hayward, I did live them. In a way. The words made no sense, but they struck him like lightning nonetheless. Explain. She opened her mouth, then closed it, clearly, wrestling with something. When she spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. Your wife? She saved my life once. And I've been trying to find a way to thank her ever since. Colt's blood turned cold. Evie had been dead for 3 years. Whatever game this woman was playing, it was a sick one. My wife never mentioned knowing any Knox family. She wouldn't have. Alara bent to retrieve her easel, her movements careful and deliberate. It was a long time ago and I was someone different then. Different how? But instead of answering, she gathered her supplies with practiced efficiency. I'll leave now, Mr. Hayward. I didn't mean to cause you pain. She turned to go, but something in her posture, the set of her shoulders, the way she carried herself, triggered a memory. Faint and distant, like an echo from a dream. Wait. The word escaped before he could stop it. She paused, but didn't turn around. That melody you were humming. Where did you learn it? Her shoulders tensed. From someone who sang it while she worked. Someone kind. And then she was walking away, leaving him standing by the creek with more questions than answers and a cold certainty that Alara Knox was going to turn his carefully ordered world upside down. But as he watched her disappear into the morning mist, Colt couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't just walking away. She was walking toward something. Something that would change everything he thought he knew about his wife's past. 3 days passed before Colt saw her again. He'd spent those days like a man possessed, riding his property lines at dawn and dusk, half hoping and half dreading another encounter with the mysterious painter. The fence painting remained untouched. He couldn't bring himself to whitewash over Evie's face, though he'd stood before it with brush in hand twice now. Griffin had taken to asking questions that made Colt's chest tight. Why did the lady paint Mama? Did Mama know her? Can she paint me too? Each innocent query was a reminder that his boy barely remembered his mother, and here was a stranger who seemed to know Evie better than her own son did. The answer came on Thursday morning when Colt discovered fresh boot prints in the mud near his vegetable garden, small prints, narrow like a woman's. Beside them, stabbed into the earth like a calling card, was a single paintbrush. She's been here, he muttered, scanning the horizon. The eastern hills rolled away in purple shadows, dotted with scrub oak and the occasional flash of a red-winged blackbird. Perfect country for hiding. That afternoon, while Griffin napped, Colt saddled his gelding Barton and rode toward town. If Alara Knox was staying somewhere nearby, the folks at Hastings General Store would know about it. Indy Hastings had run that store for 20 years and knew every soul within 50 miles. The ride into Cedar Flats took 40 minutes across sun-baked rangeland. You could smell the town before you saw it, with smoke, horses, and the faint sweetness of Madden's bakery carried on the wind. Main Street stretched between 2 rows of weathered buildings, their false fronts casting geometric shadows on the dusty ground. Indy looked up from her ledger as the store bell chimed. She was a handsome woman of 45 with steel-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. Afternoon, Colt. Griffin feeling better. He's fine, just tired from helping with the fence repairs. The lie came easy, too easy. Indy, you had any strangers pass through lately? Young woman, dark hair, calls herself Knox. Indy's pen stilled. Alara Knox checked into Tate's boarding house 3 days ago. Paid for a week up front, cash money. Real polite girl, but... She paused, studying his face. Why you asking? Found her trespassing. Painting on my property. Painting. Indy's eyebrows rose. What kind of painting? Colt hesitated. If he told the truth, the whole town would be buzzing with talk about Evie by supper time. Just personal subjects. Made me curious about her business here. Well, she's been asking questions too. About families who lived here 15, 20 years back. Spent most of yesterday afternoon in the church, looking through old records with Reverend Ellis. Indy leaned forward, her voice dropping. Said she was researching her family history, but Remy Ellis mentioned she seemed mighty interested in the Hayward name. Ice formed in Colt's veins. The Hayward name? That's what he said. Asked about births, deaths, marriages going back 2 decades. Real thorough about it. Colt's mind raced. 20 years ago, he'd been 7 years old, living with his parents on this same ranch. Evie would have been 5, still living with her family in the next county over. What could possibly connect them to this Knox woman? She say where she's from originally? Back east somewhere. Boston, maybe? Had that kind of accent when she first arrived, though it's fading some. Indy's sharp eyes studied his face. Colt, what's this really about? You look like you've seen a ghost. Before he could answer, the store bell chimed again. Nova Hastings, Indy's teenage daughter, burst through the door with the breathless excitement of youth. Mama, you won't believe what I just saw. That pretty lady from back east. She's down at the cemetery with the strangest collection of flowers. White roses, blue cornflowers, and baby's breath, all arranged just like what, honey? Indy prompted. Nova's eyes flicked to Colt, suddenly uncertain. Well, just like the bouquet Mrs. Evie always carried to church. Remember? She always said those were her favorite flowers because they meant, that's enough, Nova. Indy's voice was gentle but firm. Go help your father with the inventory. But the damage was done. Colt felt the blood drain from his face. Those flowers. Evie had carried that exact combination every Sunday for 5 years. She'd said the white roses meant new beginnings, the cornflowers meant faithfulness, and the baby's breath meant everlasting love. How could a stranger know something so intimate, so specific? I need to go. He turned toward the door, but Indy's voice stopped him. Colt, whatever's happening, be careful. That girl's carrying some heavy burden. I can see it in her eyes. And folks carrying burdens sometimes make choices the rest of us don't understand. The ride to the cemetery felt like traveling through thick honey. Every hoofbeat echoed with questions, and by the time Colt reached the wrought iron gates, his nerves were strung tight as barbed wire. He found her kneeling beside Evie's grave, her brown dress spread around her like spilled coffee. The flowers Nova had described lay arranged in a perfect bouquet against the simple headstone that read, Evelyn Rose Hayward, beloved wife and mother, gone home to glory. Alara didn't look up when his shadow fell across the grave. I wondered when you'd come. Those flowers. His voice came out rougher than intended. Where did you learn about those flowers? Now she did look up, and the tears on her cheeks caught the afternoon light like scattered diamonds. She told me they were her favorites. Said each one meant something important about love and hope and forever. When? The question cracked like a whip. When did my wife tell you that? Alara rose slowly, brushing dirt from her knees. 12 years ago, Mr. Hayward. I was 11 years old, and she saved my life. That's impossible. 12 years ago, Evie was barely 16 herself, still living with her parents over in Millerville. No, Alara's voice was steady now, no longer trembling. 12 years ago, your wife was working at the sanctuary house for wayward children, 3 counties east of here. It was summer work, helping Sister Mary Catherine care for orphans and runaways. Colt's world tilted. Evie had never mentioned working at any orphanage. She'd told him she spent that summer helping her aunt with a difficult pregnancy. You're lying. Am I? Alara reached into her pocket and withdrew a small, worn photograph. She held it out to him with steady hands. The image was faded and creased, but unmistakable. A younger Evie stood surrounded by a group of children, her arm around a thin, dark-haired girl who couldn't have been more than 11. Both were smiling, and Evie wore the same blue calico dress from the fence painting. Colt's hands shook as he studied the photograph. In the background, barely visible, was the sign, St. Catherine's Sanctuary House for Children. She called me Laura then, Alara said softly. Said Alara was too fancy for a girl who needed to learn to be strong. She taught me to paint that summer. Said art could heal hurts that words couldn't touch. Why didn't she ever mention you? Pain flickered across Alara's features. Because she promised she wouldn't. I made her promise after. She swallowed hard. After what happened at the end of that summer. The wind picked up, rustling the cemetery trees and carrying with it the scent of approaching rain and the sound of hoofbeats from the direction of town, riding hard and fast toward them. The riders thundered into the cemetery like storm clouds. Given flesh, 3 men on lathered horses, their faces hard as winter stone. Colt recognized the leader immediately, Heath Madden, the baker's eldest son who'd taken a bad turn after the war. The other 2 were drifters, the kind who hired their guns to whoever paid best. Well. Heath's voice carried the false cheer of a man enjoying someone else's misfortune. If it ain't our mysterious little artist. Been looking all over. Creation for you, darling. Alara went rigid beside Colt, her face draining of color. I told you in Cheyenne, Heath. I don't have what you're looking for. Now that's where you're wrong. Heath dismounted with theatrical slowness, his hand resting casual-like on his gun butt. See, we found your hotel room after you ran. Amazing what folks leave behind when they're in a hurry. From his saddlebag, he produced a canvas roll tied with leather string. Recognize this? Alara's sharp intake of breath was answer enough. Whatever was in that roll, it meant trouble with a capital T. Colt stepped forward, placing himself between the men and Alara. You boys are on private property. Time to move along. Heath's grin turned ugly. This doesn't concern you, Hayward. Just a business matter between old friends. The lady's under my protection now. The words surprised Colt even as he spoke them. But they felt right. True. So it concerns me plenty. Your protection? Heath laughed, but there was no humor in it. You don't even know what she is, do you? What she's done? I know enough. Do you know she's a forger? That she's been painting fake masterpieces and selling them to rich folks back east? That canvas there. He gestured with the roll. That's evidence of her crimes. The accusation hit Colt like a physical blow. He glanced back at Alara, searching her face for denial, for outrage, for anything that would make Heath's words false. Instead, he found resignation. It's true, she said quietly. I was a forger. The admission should have made him step away, should have made him wash his hands of her troubles. But something in her voice, the way she held herself like she was expecting the world to end, kept his boots planted firm. He said. You said was. I quit 6 months ago. Tried to go straight. But Heath and his partners, they don't want to let me go. They say I owe them for the supplies, the training, the connections. Her voice grew stronger. They want me to paint one last forgery. A big one. Worth enough to set them up for life. And you won't do it. No. Her green eyes met his, fierce. With conviction. I won't. Not anymore. Heath spat in the dust. Noble words from a woman who's been lying for years. You think you can just walk away from us? From what you owe? I don't owe you anything. Alara snapped, and Colt heard the first real fire in her voice. You found me when I was desperate and alone, and you used that. You made me into something I never wanted to be. We made you rich. You made me empty. The truth of it rang in the cemetery air like a church bell. Colt found himself understanding more than he wanted to. This woman, this wounded, complicated woman, had been running from more than just criminals. She'd been running from herself. Here's what's going to happen, Heath said, his patience clearly wearing thin. You're coming with us. Tonight. And you're going to paint us that Remington copy we discussed. Or what? Colt's voice cut like a blade that Heath's hand moved to his gun. Or we tell the sheriff in Cheyenne exactly where to find the notorious E. Knox. I'm sure they'd be real interested to know she's been hiding out in Cedar Flats, making friends with respectable ranchers. The threat hung in the air like smoke. Colt's mind raced through possibilities, none of them good. 3 armed men against 1, with Alara caught in the middle and Griffin waiting at home for his father to return. I have a counterproposal, Colt said slowly. Heath raised an eyebrow. I'm listening. The lady stays. You ride out. And we all pretend this conversation never happened. And why would we do that? Because I'm asking nice. And because you really don't want to find out what happens if I stop asking nice. For a moment, the only sound was wind through the cemetery trees and the creak of leather as the mounted men shifted in their saddles. Heath studied Colt's face, clearly weighing his options. You're serious, he said finally. Dead serious. Over her? A woman you met 3 days ago? A criminal? Colt glanced at Alara, taking in her straight spine and lifted chin, the way she faced her accusers without flinching. Over a woman who's trying to make things right. Heath's laugh was sharp as broken glass. You really don't know, do you? About what she did that summer at the orphanage. Ice formed in Colt's chest. What are you talking about? Oh, this is rich. She hasn't told you about the fire, has she? About how the little orphan girl burned down St. Catherine's sanctuary house. The world seemed to tilt sideways. Colt turned to stare at Alara, whose face had gone white as bone. It wasn't, she began, then stopped, pressing her lips together. Wasn't what? Heath pressed, sensing weakness. Wasn't your fault that 12 children lost their home? That Sister Mary Catherine died in the flames? That your precious Evie nearly burned to death trying to save everyone? Stop. Alara's voice was barely a whisper, but Heath was just getting started. Tell him about the nightmares, Lara. Tell him about how you woke up screaming every night. After, and how his saintly wife sat beside your bed, holding your hand, promising she'd never tell anyone what really happened. That's enough. Alara's composure finally cracked. It was an accident. I knocked over a lamp during a nightmare. I never meant. Evie knew I never meant. But people died. Heath finished mercilessly. And Evie Daniels, before she became Evie Hayward, she covered for you. Lied to the authorities. Said the lamp fell during the storm. Colt felt like he'd been gut-shot. The woman he'd married, the gentle soul who wouldn't hurt a fly, had harbored a secret this dark? Had protected a child who'd caused such destruction? She saved my life, Alara whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. Not just from the fire. From what would have happened to me after. A child responsible for that much death and destruction. I would have been sent to places that make orphanages look like paradise. So she lied for you, Colt said slowly, trying to understand. She lied for me, and made me promise never to contact her again, never to bring that darkness back into her life. She said she was going to start fresh, marry a good man, have children of her own. She made me swear I'd let her be happy. The pieces were falling into place now, forming a picture that broke Colt's heart and mended it at the same time. Evie's occasional nightmares about fires, her fierce protectiveness of Griffin, her insistence on having multiple ways out of every room in their house. But you came anyway, he said. After she died, yes. I had to know. I had to see if she'd found the happiness she deserved. Heath cleared his throat loudly. Touching story. Real heartwarming. But it doesn't change the facts. She's coming with us. No, Colt said, and there was iron in his voice now. She's not. But as he faced down 3 armed men in a lonely cemetery, with the weight of terrible secrets heavy on his shoulders, Colt couldn't help wondering if he was about to make the same kind of sacrifice Evie had made 12 years ago, and whether it would cost him everything he held dear. The standoff stretched taut as a bowstring, 3 guns against one man's resolve. Heath's fingers drummed against his holster while his companions exchanged meaningful glances, the kind that preceded violence. Then thunder rolled across the sky, deep and ominous, though not a cloud was visible. It took Colt a heartbeat to realize it wasn't thunder at all, but hoofbeats. Many hoofbeats, approaching fast from the direction of town. Expecting company? Heath asked, but his cocky grin faltered. Before Colt could answer, a dozen riders crested the hill, Sheriff Vaughn leading the charge, followed by half the able-bodied men of Cedar Flats. Indy Hastings must have sent word when she saw him ride out looking like war itself. Well, hell, muttered one of Heath's men. Afternoon, gentlemen. Sheriff Vaughn reined in his bay gelding, his weathered hand resting casual-like on his rifle stock. Mighty fine day for a cemetery visit, though I hear tell some folks have been making unwelcome calls on our citizens. Heath's bravado cracked like thin ice. 3 against 1 were bad odds. 3 against 13 were suicide. Just having a friendly conversation, Sheriff. Didn't look particularly friendly from where I Saturday. Vaughn's pale eyes swept the scene, taking in Alara's tear-stained face and Colt's protective stance. Miss Knox, you all right? She nodded, though her hands trembled like aspen leaves. Good. Now then, Mr. Madden, I believe your father's been looking for you. Something about missing money from the bakery till. The sheriff's tone was conversational, but steel ran beneath it. Might be best if you and your friends moved along. Permanently. Heath's face flushed red as brick dust. This isn't over. Yes, Colt said quietly, it is. For a moment, violence hung in the air like heat shimmer. Then Heath jerked his reins. Hard, wheeling his horse around. Come on, boys. This backwater town ain't worth the trouble. They rode out hard, dust boiling in their wake. The posse watched until they disappeared beyond the eastern hills before Sheriff Vaughn spoke again. Colt, I need a word. Privately. The other men began drifting away, their duty done but their curiosity clearly burning. Only Alara remained, standing beside Evie's grave like a penitent seeking absolution. Sheriff Vaughn got a telegraph this morning, the lawman said once they were alone. From Cheyenne. Seems there's been some interest in a certain E. Knox, wanted for questioning about forged paintings. Colt's blood chilled. Sheriff, now, I also got another telegraph. From the Pinkerton Detective Agency. Vaughn's eyes never left Alara's face. Seems Miss Knox here turned herself in 6 months ago. Testified against a whole network of art forgers in exchange for immunity. Been helping them track down stolen goods ever since. The revelation hit like lightning. Alara looked up, sharply, surprise and hope warring in her expression. That's right, miss. You've been cleared of all charges, provided you continue cooperating with the investigation. Which, according to Detective Morrison, you've been doing admirably. Vaughn tipped his hat. The men who just rode out? They're the ones with warrants. On their heads now. Alara's knees buckled. Colt caught her before she hit the ground, his strong arms encircling her trembling form. For the first time since he'd known her, she felt fragile, not like the steel-spined woman who'd faced down armed men, but like the frightened child she'd once been. It's over, she whispered against his chest. It's over, he confirmed, breathing. In the scent of her hair, paint and wildflowers, and something indefinably sweet, Sheriff Vaughn cleared his throat diplomatically. I'll leave you folks to sort things out. Miss Knox, if you need anything, you know where to find me. As the lawman rode away, silence settled over the cemetery like a blanket. Colt became acutely aware that he was still holding Alara, that she fit against him like she belonged there, that her hand had somehow found its way to rest over his heart. Why didn't you tell me, he asked softly, about turning yourself in? She pulled back to look at him, her green eyes luminous with unshed tears. Because I've spent so many years being ashamed of what I'd become, even after I tried to make it. Right? I couldn't believe I deserved forgiveness. And the fire? At the orphanage. Pain flickered across her features. An accident, like I said. I was having nightmares about my parents' death, thrashing around in my sleep. The lamp fell, caught the curtains. She shuddered. Evie woke me up, dragged me out of the burning building. Then she went back. 3 times. Saved 8 children before the roof collapsed. And Sister Mary Catherine went back for the last 2 children. The youngest ones, who were too scared to move. Alara's voice broke. She didn't make it out. Colt understood now why Evie had lied. Why she'd protected this broken child who'd already lost so much. His wife had seen past the tragedy to the wounded soul beneath. She used to sit with me afterward, Alara continued. Every night when the nightmares came. She'd hold my hand and tell me stories about a place where the sun always shone, where families lived on ranches and children grew up safe and loved. She was describing this place. Our ranch. I think so. She said someday she'd live somewhere like that, with a good man who'd protect what mattered. She'd have children of her own, and they'd never know the kind of fear I'd known. Thunder rumbled. Overhead, real thunder this time. The first fat raindrops began to fall, darkening the dusty earth around Evie's grave. She found that, Colt said. For a while, she found that. I know. That's why I came. To see if her dreams came true. To paint them, so I'd never forget what hope looked like. The rain began in earnest now, drumming against the headstone and turning the cemetery paths to mud. But neither of them moved. To seek shelter. What will you do now? Colt found himself asking. Now that you're free? Alara looked up at him, rain streaming down her cheeks like tears. I don't know. I've been running for so long. I'm not sure I remember how to stay still. You could learn. Something shifted in the air between them, fragile as a soap bubble, but real as the rain soaking through their clothes. Colt found himself thinking of Griffin's questions about the pretty lady who painted, of the fence that now bore his wife's image in loving detail, of the way Alara's presence had brought color. Back to corners of his world he'd forgotten were gray. Colt, she whispered, and his name on her lips sounded like a prayer. He cupped her face in his hands, his calloused thumbs brushing away raindrops and tears. Stay. I don't know how to be part of a family. I don't know how to belong anywhere. Neither did I, before Evie taught me. His voice was rough with emotion. Maybe it's time someone returned the favor. But as he leaned down to kiss her, a child's terrified scream cut through the rain. Griffin's voice, calling for his father from somewhere beyond the cemetery gates. Colt's blood turned to ice water. He spun toward the sound of his son's voice. Every parental instinct screaming danger. Through the cemetery gates, he could see Griffin's small figure running toward them, his face streaked with tears and terror. Papa, Papa, they took Barton. The bad men took our horse. Heath and his men. They'd circled back, and while Colt had been distracted by revelations and rain-soaked confessions, They'd struck at the one thing guaranteed to draw him out, his son's beloved horse. Colt knelt as Griffin crashed into his arms, the boy's words tumbling out between sobs. I was in the barn, brushing Barton like you taught me, and they came. The mean one with the yellow teeth said to tell you they'd be waiting at Devil's Canyon. Said if Miss Alara don't come paint their picture, they'll hurt Barton real bad. Devil's Canyon. A box canyon 20 miles north, with only one way in or out. The perfect place for an ambush. It's a trap, Alara said quietly, reading his thoughts. They know you'll come. Of course it's a trap. Colt stood, lifting Griffin with him. But they've got my boy's horse. And that horse means everything to him. Griffin had raised Barton from a colt, bottle feeding him when his mother died, sleeping in the stall when the young horse took sick. The gelding wasn't just livestock, he was family. I'll go with you, Alara said. Like hell you will. Colt, listen to me. She caught his arm, her fingers strong and sure. They don't want the horse. They want me. If I don't show up, they'll keep escalating until someone gets hurt. Someone's going to get hurt anyway. Those men aren't the type to honor bargains. Then we don't give them a choice. Fire sparked in her green eyes, the same determination he'd seen when she faced down Heath in the cemetery. You know that canyon, don't you? Every rock and hiding place. Been hunting there since I was knee-high to a grasshopper. Good. Then we do this smart. Together. Griffin tugged at his father's shirt. Can Miss Alara really get Barton back? Colt looked down at his son's trusting face, then at the woman who'd brought art and mystery and dangerous hope back into their lives. The woman Evie had saved, who now seemed determined to save them in return. Yeah, son. I think she can. The ride to Devil's Canyon took 2 hours through driving rain. Griffin stayed behind with Sheriff Vaughn, safe in the jailhouse, while Colt and Alara pushed their mounts hard across muddy rangeland. They didn't talk much, both lost in their own thoughts and preparations. A mile from the canyon mouth, they dismounted and continued on foot. Colt led the way through scrub oak and juniper, his hunter's instincts guiding them along game trails invisible to city eyes. The rain had stopped, but the air still smelled of wet earth and approaching night. There. He pointed to where the canyon walls rose like cathedral spires against the darkening sky. They'll have Barton tied up somewhere inside, probably near the back wall. Guards at the entrance. How many ways out? Just the one we came through. Unless you count climbing straight up 200 feet of rock face. Alara studied the terrain with an artist's eye for detail. What about that ledge there? About 30 feet up? Colt followed her gaze to a narrow shelf of stone that ran along the canyon's eastern wall. What about it? If someone could get up there, they'd have a clear view of the whole canyon floor. Perfect position to cause a distraction. Someone meaning you. I'm smaller, lighter, and I've been climbing around art galleries and museums for years. You'd be surprised how many masterpieces hang in hard-to-reach places. The plan was risky as hell, but it might work. While Alara created chaos from above, Colt could slip in from below and get to Barton. Simple, clean, probably suicidal. If this goes wrong, he began. It won't. She pressed something into his hand, a small canvas, painted with swift, sure strokes. It showed Griffin laughing as he rode Barton across a sunlit meadow, the ranch house visible in the background with flower boxes blooming beneath the windows. When did you paint this? This morning, before Heath found me. I wanted you to see what I saw when I looked at your life. What Evie dreamed of, made real. The painting stole his breath. In a few dozen brushstrokes, she'd captured not just Griffin and Barton, but the love and hope and possibility that made their little ranch a home. Alara. She silenced him with a kiss, quick and fierce and tasting of rain and promise. For luck, she whispered against his lips. Then she was gone, moving like a ghost through the shadows toward the canyon wall. The distraction, when it came, was spectacular. Alara had somehow managed to rig a rock slide on the canyon's western wall. Nothing dangerous, but enough falling stone to send Heath and his men scrambling for cover and cursing at the top of their lungs. While they argued about whether it was natural or sabotage, Colt slipped through the chaos toward the back of the canyon. He found Barton tied to a stunted pine, the horse nickering softly in recognition. The gelding was unharmed, but clearly spooked, ears flicking toward every sound. Easy, boy, Colt murmured, working at the rope with his knife. We're going home. Not so fast. Colt spun to find Heath emerging from behind a boulder, gun drawn and pointed at his chest. The man's face was scraped raw from flying rock, and his eyes held the wild gleam of someone with nothing left to lose. Your girlfriend's got impressive. In with those rocks. Pity it won't save either of you. Let the horse go, Heath. This is between you and her. Oh, but it's not anymore, is it? Heath's smile was ugly as sin. See, I've been thinking. A forger who can paint like that, she's wasted on copying other people's work. But a ranch with prime grazing land, a man with a reputation for integrity, a cute little boy. Now that's worth something. Ice formed in Colt's gut. What are you talking about? I'm talking about expanding my operation. Art forgery small potatoes compared to what a man could do with the right base of operations. The right family to use as motivation. You're insane. I'm practical. Your lady friend paints what I tell her to paint, or your boy starts losing fingers. Simple business. Rage roared through Colt's veins like wildfire. This wasn't just about money or art anymore. Heath was threatening Griffin, threatening their future. One problem with your plan, Colt said, his voice deadly calm. What's that? You're assuming I'm going to let you walk out of this canyon alive. The fight was brutal and quick. Heath had the gun, but Colt had 20 years of hard living and the fury of a father protecting his child. When the dust settled, Heath lay unconscious. Among the rocks, his weapon spinning harmlessly away. Alara appeared at Colt's shoulder, breathing hard from her scramble down the canyon wall. The other two ran when the shooting started. They were hired guns, not diehard believers. She looked at Heath's still form, then at Colt's bruised knuckles. Is it really over this time? It's over. 3 months later, as autumn painted the hills in shades of gold and crimson, Colt stood on his front porch watching Griffin teach Alara to ride. She was a natural in the saddle, her artist's balance serving her well, though she still gripped. The reins tighter than necessary. The fence bore new paintings now, not just Evie's portrait, but scenes of ranch life in all seasons. Griffin on Barton. Sunrise over the eastern pasture. The vegetable garden in full bloom. A visual story of their life together, painted by loving hands. She's good for him, Sheriff Vaughn observed, settling into the porch swing with a cup of coffee. Good for you too. Yeah. Colt watched Alara laugh as Griffin showed off with a fancy dismount. She is. You thinking about making it permanent? Colt's hand drifted to the small velvet box in his pocket, the ring he'd bought in town. Yesterday, simple gold with a tiny diamond that caught the light like hope made solid. Tonight. I'm thinking about asking tonight. In the distance, Alara called out something about painting techniques, while Griffin peppered her with questions about color and brush sizes. The sound of their laughter carried on the evening breeze. Mixing with the lowing of cattle and the rustle of autumn leaves, Evie's dream had come true after all, just not the way any of them had expected. Sometimes the most beautiful paintings came from mixing unexpected colors, creating something entirely new while honoring what came before. As the sun set behind the western mountains, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold, Colt Hayward smiled and went inside to help his family prepare supper. Well now, if that don't beat all, a mysterious lady painter bringing love and color back to a grieving widower's world. Sometimes the best gifts come wrapped in the most unexpected packages. If this tale warmed your heart like a campfire on a cold night, give it a thumbs up and tell us in the comments where you're watching from today. We'd be mighty obliged to hear from you.